In this video, we want to make something interesting happen with our mechanics. Now you'll notice if you come down here and you hit the big play button, you can actually play around. It's just like a first-person shooter. But what I want to do is I want to add my own functionality to the level. And I think the easiest thing to start off with is we're just going to make something trigger when we enter a volume. So we're actually going to declare a volume inside of our level. And when we enter that space, that volume, we are going to do something. So maybe play a sound effect, I think would be a good one, or turn on a light would be another good one. That's what we're going to do. So let me close out of here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this folder right here where I said example. I'm going to call this project mechanics. You may see a couple pop-ups. It's nothing to worry about. So when it comes to blueprints, let's think about what we need to get this thing working. We said we needed a volume, right? So inside of our modes window up here, we can actually find something called a box trigger. If I go up to this modes and I do search classes and I type in box, you'll see a couple things pop up. Go to box trigger and drag it into our scene. When we drag it in here, this now exists inside of our level. And this is something that we could walk up and go inside of. If you want to change the size of this, you notice it's kind of small. If you go into your details panel over here, this is a panel that will give you more information about whatever you have selected. So you'll see if I select my player, or if I select a box or my ground or whatever. This is where we can actually make some changes to our object. For any of you who are used to Unity, this would be the inspector panel or something equivalent to that. So we're going to select our object over here under shape, this little drop down, this little component right here. We're going to make this bigger, and you'll notice that the orientation for XYZ is a little bit different in Unreal. If you're used to other game engines like Unity, we would think Y would be vertical, but it's just a little different. And once you get used to it, it's not a big deal. So I'm going to change the size here to just something a little bit bigger. And just so we know where it is, I'm actually going to put this over the first. We'll just align it over here. So this space right here, we want to do something when the player enters a space. So now that we have our volume and we have it resized, we actually need to trigger it to do something. Before I do that, I think it would be good practice to rename this to something specific. So right here, I'm going to call this first event trigger. Now the reason that we name this, you're going to see in a second, I'm going to open up something called the level blueprints. If you click on this blueprints button and you click on open level blueprint, once I click this, it's going to open a new window. Now what this is a node-based logic view of everything inside of our level. In other words, I can get a reference to objects in my level and do things based off of an event. Now what we want to do is we want to call an event whenever the player enters this box trigger right here. So to do that, what I'm going to do, and this is going to look a little bit funky at first, is we're going to make sure that we have this box trigger inside of our level selected. We're going to hop back over to our sandbox. Again, this is our level blueprints. Everything inside of our level will have access to all the objects here. Right click, and if you expand this first one, add event for first event trigger, you expand collision, you're going to see add on actor, begin overlap, end overlap, and hit. Begin overlap just means if something touched this object, if something overlapped this object. So we're going to click on this, and because we have our box trigger selected, when we click this, this will call an event. When this box trigger is overlapped, we can get access to the other thing that overlapped it and this actor. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to now pull off of this and do something. So maybe print string, and we'll say something has overlapped. Compile. When you compile, this just does a check to make sure that everything is logically sound and there's no errors here. We're also going to hit save. Then we're going to click back. We're going to minimize this. Click back over here. Hit play. And you'll see that when we overlap this first right here, we get that pop-up over there in the top left. That lets us know that it's working. Now, one thing you might know if you've done more work with triggers is that we may want to decide what is overlapping here. So if we were triggering a cutscene or something, we would only want to trigger that when the player entered, not an enemy or something else. So what I'm going to add to this is I'm going to add a player check. To do that, I'm going to open back up my level blueprints. Again, you can either unminimize it or just blueprints, open level blueprint. Once you're inside, I need to do my check right here. So I want the overlap, but I want to test to see what actually overlapped and then make sure it's the player. To do that, we can get easy access to the player. If you right click down here, there's a function called getPlayerPawn. And if you type that in, this runs a function that grabs the current player. Now what I want to do to test whether or not the player is what overlapped this, when this event gets called, I get access to the other actor, right? So if I pull off of here and I type equals equals, press enter, this will do a test to see if one thing is equal to another. Now if the other actor, meaning the player enters this thing, the player would be the other actor, and we get the player and we pull that in there, it's going to do a test to see if these are the same object. And in this case, it should be. And if it is, we need to do something with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the branch. We type in branch. Again, we pulled off of this. This is the main execution node, meaning that it'll run this node and then run this node and then run whatever's connected to that. So on actor begin overlap, pull off, do a branch. We'll say, based on this condition, if it's true, do this. If it's false, do something else if we want. Based on this condition, and if we test our other actor, and if that's equal to our player, then this condition, which I'm going to drag and connect, should be true. If it's true, we'll print this, and let's update that. Player has overlapped. And if it's false, nothing should happen, right? So if we hit compile and save, what should happen is if we enter this volume, this event will get called. It'll test to see if it's the player. If it is, and our test is true, it should print this string right here. So let's just give that a shot. Make sure you hit compile save, minimize, hit play. Player has overlapped. All right, so at this point, we've created a simple trigger, and while it's not exciting, the interesting part is we can do whatever we want after this. We've essentially created a player trigger. You could do any number of things. You could play a sound effect, you could enable an object, you could trigger a particle effect, but we've done some simple logic here, and we've added that onto our system, and we can start to do some interesting things with our level now.